Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Monday, December 8th, 2025, and Somalian scams in Minnesota are much worse than they seem, and they're being exposed, and Dr. Oz is on it. And honestly, I've got Dr. Oz talking about this scam, and he says, we went in and shut it down. It reminds me of like the late 90s talk shows, except now they've moved. It's The Apprentice and Oprah and Dr. Oz, except for Oprah's on the other side of this whole thing with The Rock, which is unfortunate. But Dr. Oz, I guess, is our guy, and he's moving to stamp out the scams in Minnesota, which is funny. So that's later in the show. Former minister confirms that the carbon taxes are a shell game. Guilbeault is asked, are these carbon taxes, they were supposed to be gone, but are they really? And he says, no, they were always there. So that's why I didn't resign before this. 20% unemployment for youth. They didn't investigate at all the impact of bringing in all of these foreigners, etc., on youth employment. They didn't investigate it at all. And so now we've done this and we're going to continue to do this. And the youth are suffering and nobody seems to care in the government. Nothing is changing and nobody's making any kind of moves to change it. So that's very, very odd as well. Grocery code of conduct, more control for the government over food, bad. That's a bad thing. And yet everybody's framing it as a good thing because it's supposed to lead to cheaper grocery prices or something like that. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. And DEI bureaucracy, there's a whole bunch of money going to this DEI bureaucracy that's kind of embedded itself in the government with all these extra jobs to make sure that DEI is adhered to. And it's unnecessary waste and it's a lot of money. So we'll talk about that. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we're starting with our grab bag of governance. The meat of the free show today is this free speech stuff. And they're really, really cracking down on free speech. They're really trying to crack down on free speech. One of the things that I want to talk about as well is the election. And people are saying what's happening is the conservatives are stalling in a way that's very effective, I guess, maybe. And I don't know, it may be on purpose, but Mouclair says this is ungovernable and the government is looking for a way to go into an election in order to get a majority. Carney's poll numbers are going up. So the story's changing a little bit. So now he's going to get a majority if we go to an election right after Christmas, or they're going to try and do the spring session and get their censorship laws passed. If they can't get their censorship laws passed in the spring session, then they'll go for a majority in April is the suspicion. We'll see if the conservatives are able to obstruct enough to not get these speech control things passed. Are they doing their job? Maybe a little bit. I try and give credit where it's due. I'm just not sure. Anyway, there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. Our grab bag of governance. Alex is responding to Norman Spector. Norman is talking about a story I brought to you yesterday. I just want to show you responses to this because it's jaw-dropping and people are upset about it, and other people than just me. Norman says Carney plans to grant cabinet ministers the power to exempt any individual or company from any federal law that's on the books, except for the criminal code, for up to 6 years. The measure wasn't included in the version of the Liberals' November 4th budget that was given to reporters. It was not discussed in the government's speeches in Parliament about this omnibus bill. No opposition party, aside from the Bloc Québécois, seems to have noticed it was there until the Star pointed it out. And so Alex says this is BS. This is to help a bunch of cronies. This in no way protects Canadians. Right. It's a very, very strange thing. Dennis says this kind of sweeping power for a minister gets, let's call it as it is, hidden from journalists and the public and now gets dropped all of a sudden before the holidays. I often talk of Friday night news dumps. This is an example of that. Another concern I have is they're going to ram C9 through on Friday. And they're just going to be like, okay, it's cool. And then the Senate will finish on the 18th or something like that. And they'll ram it through, give it royal assent before Christmas and just absolutely put people back on their heels. I think it would be unbelievable, but man, I've seen other crazier things and it's been a little too quiet. You know, when the kids are playing and the crayons are melting on somebody's radiator, I did that. Anyway, very quiet. When watching the crayons melt on the radiator when the radiator comes on is very, very interesting. When the crayon oil goes into the radiator and disappears from the top, even more interesting. When the radiator stops working, that's when you make your escape. I don't know why the radiator's not working. Yeah, it is. It does seem cold in here, but it's not that cold. I just need a blanket. Holly Doan says Canadian immigration. I think it's Canadian immigration, refugees, and citizenship. We should not be spearheading having a minister whose job it is to oversee refugees, unless that is to see refugees leave the country. We're not a resettlement for refugees. Thanks very much. We can't even employ our own youth, so we can't do anything for you. If you come here, it will be worse. See you later. Without parliamentary scrutiny, ordered research into enforcement of digital IDs using passports. One of the things that came up in our discussions with Canada Digital Services is the assumption that passports would be used in Canada as an identity document, access to information. So they wanted to use your passport as a digital ID document, and isn't that wild and crazy? I think that's pretty crazy, right? Digital ID, they really, really want to push it, and they want to make it something you're used to, so they can just flip it over into you're just using this more. You're already using this. You're just using it more now. Don't worry. Nothing to see here. Nothing to worry about, right? Oh, don't even think about it too much. You just have to use it more, right? Yes, with the internet, but it's fine. Nope, absolutely not, because then they can just shut you down, right? Completely shut you down. An example, I have a Twitter account that I guess is medium well known to governments and Twitter who want to shut it down. And I was going to do an interview with somebody and be a co-host, which has official duties in the space. And so I tried to show up to the space, but X prevented me from being able to access the space. So I loaded up a different X account, and lo and behold, I was able to access the space with the other X account. If they tie your digital identity to your actual identity, I would not be able to utilize another X account unless I was breaking the law, I'm sure. And then all of a sudden, in that way, they have full control of speech, right? Moving on, government also wants control of the food, and that's very concerning. Food professor says Grocer Metro has officially signed on to the Grocery Code of Conduct, joining Loblaws, which came on board last week. Food professor says, again, the code establishes clear standards for commercial relationships across the grocery sector and aims to bring greater transparency and predictability to how business is conducted. In the light of the bread fixing scandal, I would want transparency, but I don't want the government to have a damn thing to do with food, because the next thing you know, they'll say, listen, there's not enough crickets in this flour. The problem with the flour is that it's flour and not crickets. And then they'll say, oh yeah, and by the way, the problem with grocery stores, the reason that you guys are bad and stuff is because you tell people too much. So now you're not allowed to tell people if there's crickets in the flour. And then people would be like, wow, the bread tastes weird, kind of like there's crickets in it. And you'll be called a conspiracy theorist and maligned and made fun of and removed from society. And then 3 to 5 years later, maybe a decade later, you'll be found to be right. And then the bread people will have to pay some kind of fee. But by that time, the damage is already done, and people kind of like the cricket bread now. And it's so evil. It's so evil because that's the pattern of what they do. And then they admit it and they pay off some people, but the people who get paid off are just their insider friends anyway. So the whole thing's kind of BS, and we're just we're sheep being directed through chutes by herding animals, right? Mark Nixon says Elizabeth May. I told you when Elizabeth May supported the budget, she would not get anything for the climate change thing. They were going to build the pipeline, or they were going to pretend to build the pipeline, and they're going to move forward at the government level, but there's going to be obstruction. I don't think the pipeline's going to get built, but that's neither here nor there at this point in time. Elizabeth May looks like a fool, and she's trying to do damage control, and other people are talking about that. Mouclair is talking about that. Mark Nixon says Elizabeth May is now pretending she was tricked into backing Carney's budget. Oh, his name was Rumpelstiltskin. I was tricked. Tom Mouclair lays it out perfectly. She vowed she'd never support the budget and then voted for it anyway. She got nothing for it. Environmental groups ripped her apart, and now she's trying to put a green toothpaste back in the bottle. And that's what happens when you trade principles for politics. May didn't get played by Pierre. She got played by Carney. The funny thing is, Elizabeth May didn't have to vote for the budget. She could have voted no. Andrew Scheer would have abstained, and it would have passed anyway. Know how I know that? Because Andrew Scheer was hiding behind the curtains. And until I get an explanation for why Andrew Scheer was hiding behind the curtains, I don't have any other opinion on what happened. What happened is the Conservatives allowed the budget to pass. Why? Because the polls are scaring them. Why? Because they're not resonating for multiple reasons. Because it doesn't seem like they're talking about the things that matter in public. And it doesn't seem like they have much of a plan other than support the Liberals, but fight them on Twitter. Unfortunately. And I mean, if I'm wrong, I wish that I knew that I was wrong. But it doesn't seem like I'm wrong, right? It doesn't seem like these guys have a strategy to stop this globalist train, because maybe they're on the globalist train. Anyway, here's what's going on in British Columbia. If you were trying to stop this stuff, this is kind of how I would expect people would go about it. But here we go. Here's Dallas Brody.
World-renowned child advocate Christopher Elston has informed us that a private gender clinic in Vancouver is performing double mastectomies on healthy girls as young as 14 years old. 14. Mr. Speaker, my question through you to the Premier is this: how can he possibly allow this to continue?
Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have to say this is another sad day in the BC legislature when Conservative politicians are trying to dictate what parents should be doing and decisions they should be making with love and support for their children. And we're picking on vulnerable children. Let me be clear about something. Health decisions, individual health decisions for kids are a protected right of parents to make with their doctor in the best interests of their children, not by governments and not by politicians. I want to also say something, that gender identity is protected under the BC Human Rights Code, and that was unanimously passed in this legislature. I also want to say it's not a surprise that this is in the House now, that we debate these things, picking on vulnerable kids.
She asked, how can we allow doctors to mutilate vulnerable children? And they're saying this is hate. Listen.
We have a party in the opposition that decided their tent was so big that it included intolerance, racism, and hate. MLAs across the aisle are leaders in their community, and when they tolerate it in their party, they tolerate it in this province, and they bring it to the House. Mr. Speaker, we are a party that believes in human rights. We believe in defending the rights of all individuals to live a dignified life in this province and to be protected by our Human Rights Code. We believe that we shouldn't be picking on vulnerable kids and the decisions that their parents make with their doctors. Thank you.
Wow, right? My jaw this morning was on the floor as I watched this. I couldn't believe that the response to how are we allowing this practice of mutilating healthy children's sexual organs, why are we allowing this to happen? The response is, if doctors want to and their parents are cool with it, why are you putting your nose in this? Well, it's horrific. I mean, it's the Island of Dr. Moreau stuff, right? Like you can't offer a product that you can't deliver, right? Nobody can change your sex, but these people are claiming that to children who don't know better. And then when it doesn't go well, they're just ignored. And so like, it's so crazy, but this is hate, as they say. And that's something that we should be aware of. Okay. Bradshaw's responding to this. I just want to go quickly through this election stuff before we get to the speech stuff. Bradshaw says National News Watch stating satisfaction with Mark Carney is up 3 points. I wonder if that's true. It's not. Also, if Carney didn't control the media and everything was exposed, where would Carney actually be ranking? I guess we'll never know because Carney is too much of a coward to let the truth be told. Well, it's not even that he's a coward. It's that power holds on to power, and allowing the truth to be told. The whole premise of these people is that truth is subjective and that they get to make up the truth, and whatever they say is the truth, and whatever you say is the truth is far right Nazi stuff. And that's the game here. It's all power. It has nothing to do with truth. Truth doesn't matter. We're in a post-truth world, and that's something that people have a hard time grasping. Truth is your truth, my truth, their truth, his truth, her truth. The truth of the matter is they're playing on that muddiness in order to water down everything. Of course, it's not true. There is objective truth. There are four lights. There is two apples. There are two apples on that table, if there are indeed two apples on that table. But there is an objective truth. You don't have to listen to the constructed narrative, but the constructive narrative is the point. The constructed narrative is the thing that is part and parcel of reality. If they say he's up 3 points, well, he's up 3 points. They'll make it so. And so our elections are rigged, the polls are rigged, they control it all, and they're going for a specific strategy. And this is the strategy. Well, Claire lays it out. I'll let him lay it out, because this is where I heard it from. And so, again, credit where it's due. Here we go.
And Tom, I have to ask you this. This is the last week the House of Commons is sitting for 2025. What do you expect to see?
A little bit of fireworks, a little bit of stunts here and there, like the motion you and I just discussed. But now the real deep thinking is going to start taking place in the Liberal Party, because are they going to keep waiting around, for example, to have their budget bill finally passed? Because all the games that are being played by the opposition parties right now are holding that back. That's bad for the whole country. They're the government. If you look at the numbers of Mark Carney, he's way ahead of Pierre Poilievre in terms of personal popularity. The parties are not, that far apart, but the Liberals still have a lead. There's going to be strong pressure to go sooner rather than later to an election. My thinking is still they're going to try to muddle through the spring session, and they'll either go May-ish, after they've tried everything that they can and they realize it's not going to work. There's actually a strategic reason for that as well, because Liberal voters tend to be older, and you don't want them voting in the middle of the winter. You want them voting with better weather. That's why April 28th was a magic date last year, because the weather had started getting better at that stage. The other thing they can do as a trick is they can make it to June, use the summer to give out checks and be nice to everybody, and then come back in September and have the election. The House will not even have to reconvene. That doesn't give Poilievre his very good soapbox that he uses to very good effect. He's a great opposition leader, and he won't have that soapbox, and everybody would be plunging straight into an election. That's the other option. Right now, I think that they're probably starting to head towards May, June, because I don't think that it's not governable the way it's going right now.
All right, we will have to.
Not governable. They can't get their free speech controls passed. Right. And speaking of, the government got community noted. Foreign Policy Canada says, and I reported this yesterday before they got community noted, because I think I laughed at it. Dissenting voices disappearing from your feed. It might not be an accident. Some foreign regimes silence critics through takedowns, legal threats, and immediate intimidation campaigns. Learn their tactics and think before you share. And the community note says the Canadian government is currently in the process of drafting Bill C9, which would criminalize forms of protected speech and protest. And so there's a whole bunch of responses down here as well, talking about, and there was one in particular, and of course I can't find it now, one in particular that was clipping news articles talking about how the government themselves were the ones who were taking down Canadians' free speech, or speech that they were claiming was controversial because it was inconvenient to them. Oh, maybe it's here. No, it's not. Crash Test Canadian is responding to this whole thing as well, the free speech thing. And he said he went to ask AI, and I've heard this from other people as well, people in the legal profession, that the CRTC has a lot of influence and works with X to censor speech, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sure if they're working with X, they're working with all sorts of other ones. But I think this is a Grok answer or an AI answer. So as with everything online these days, take it with a grain of salt. Nothing is absolutely accurate, etc. So Grok is asked, or this AI is asked, does the CRTC work with Twitter to suppress content they consider undesirable? And does Twitter comply? Yes or no? Yes and yes. They do work with Twitter, and Twitter complies. The Canadian radio, the CRTC, collaborates with X, formerly Twitter, through regulatory frameworks like Online Streaming Act, Bill C-11, and the Online News Act, Bill C-18, which empower the CRTC to address undesirable content such as hate speech, misinformation, or non-Canadian dominant material via algorithmic adjustments, deliverability mandates, and more. So I'm shocked, but I'm not that shocked. Right? The digital ID being pushed through the passports is more shocking, in my opinion. Maybe we're not there yet. Hold on. It's there soon. Very, very soon. Basil the Great said a man was put in prison today after he said on social media that men and women have different skeletons. I'm not making this up. Europe is going through not just a free speech crisis, but a facts-based reality crisis. This is absolutely insane. Yes, and we know the story here. He's choosing not to pay the monetary fine, so he spends 10 days in jail, and he says, well, screw these people. I'll spend 10 days in jail. I'm not paying for those. And Elon Musk is calling for the dissolution of the EU. Elon Musk says, dissolve the EU and return power to the people. Jonathan says the EU is still fining Hungary £1 million a day because they don't let in enough Muslims or African migrants. We should go back to just having a free trade zone in Europe, not all this undemocratic bureaucracy. It is very undemocratic bureaucracy. The White Rabbit podcast says in 24 hours, the time millions of Australians could disappear from social media, hounded out of their free speech by unfree fines being threatened by Australian Labor in a move that breaches constitutional protections and political debate, preventing those who will not only comply with losing access to their live feeds from Parliament, their democracy, which run on YouTube. AI accounts, however, do not seem to need to show proof of identity, who owns and operates them, in a nasty little anti-human move. Join myself, Deborah, and all of these people talking about it. It's an hour and a half long stream, but Australia is doing the same thing. Here is Mike Benz talking about USAID setting up a rule of law program to capture judges. And I think this kind of program is operating in Canada. And I've got to say goodbye to the stream first, but I want to get to the passport. I think I said the passports were being used. Anyway, here's Mike Benz. Hold on.
They hit with corruption charges.
Oh, man, it's been one day since Too Fast Talking. Darn. I'm getting this all wrong here. Where's the speed? There it is. There we go.
Which makes you wonder. I haven't actually looked into this yet, but if I were to just go to like USAID, Rule of Law, Moldova, I bet you that like who went against Shore? I bet you it was these Rule of Law. There you go. This is the Millennial Challenge Corporation. This is the USAID program. The USAID Model Court Project, and the U.S. Embassy in Moldova. It's so predictable. You just know anytime the State Department's political enemies are getting arrested, you just know there's a USAID Rule of Law program to have the prosecutors go after that person. The USAID Model Court Program. Model puppet judges. Model puppet prosecutors. This is from 2021. This is right before the war broke out. The U.S. Embassy in Moldova hopes this project will have a significant impact on the judiciary in Moldova. So while they're arresting the State Department's enemies in Moldova, the U.S. State Department is putting significant impact on the judges and prosecutors in Moldova. So here is the Model Court Project, our partnership with Moldovan courts. Jesus Christ, man! To create judicial centers of excellence. I mean, imagine if the Russians did this. Imagine if, like, the Russian embassy had a direct partnership with the courts. The independent judicial system is directly fucking partnered with the government embassy.
They call it a rule of law program. Here, he's going to explain it again further.
We'll do court performance monitoring. Yeah, we're going to judge the judges by how well we're going to monitor the judges for how well they arrest our political enemies. We're doing strategic planning, judicial leadership. So this is like training them so that you move up into the Moldovan Supreme Court only if you're blessed by the U.S. Embassy in Moldova. A grants program. They're directly fucking funding them with grants.
This is happening in Canada. Okay? I want you to understand this. I want you to understand this. This is happening in Canada right now. And I don't know that there is, there's no political will to stop it whatsoever. There is absolutely no political will to stop it. And with that, I got to say goodbye to the stream. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you want the whole show, head over to CanadaPoly.com. If not, that's okay. We will catch you tomorrow. And for everybody else, we will carry on in just a second as soon as I kill the stream here.